gosh, loving that
We got
music.
some vibe in this music. Welcome to the RNS Backstage Live. We want to thank Feather for being such an incredible sponsor to let us take the conversations of today. We want to go deeper with what we're hearing, what you learned today, and we want to light up this chat. So tell us who you are. Who's backstage today? Tell us where you're coming from, and heck, drop your organ there so we can celebrate what you're doing out in the world to make it a better place.
Absolutely. Thank you for being part of this day. We are so honored to have a third co-host on the conversation stage over here. We've got Gabe Cooper in the house, and he's going to tell us all about his brand new book that's hitting shelves right here, The Responsive Nonprofit. But let me tell you a little bit about Gabe, because we're also going to kind of put him on the hot seat, the white seat over here. So let's get started. Gabe is this man that's all about generosity. And I remember the first day that we met him, and we found just a kinship, not of values, but about the world that we want to co-create in connecting more people in generosity experiences. And so that's Gabe's story. You know, he was in a leadership role serving, at large nonprofits in the early 2000s, where he went on to build a couple of really successful products in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. But now his work with Virtuous and the team at Virtuous that's literally surrounded us here for this conference is all gathered around this idea of generosity and how do we push people forward to create more good in the world. And so it's a kinship, and this team, has been featured on all the likes of CNN, New York Times, Mashable, Forbes, the We're for Good podcast, let me add on there too. But Gabe and his wife Farah have 5 amazing children, and they live just outside of Phoenix here in Gilbert. Gabe, welcome. Yeah. So good to have you.
Welcome to your stage,
Welcome
Gabe.
to your headquarters. We're really glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love the vibe that you guys put out. This is probably coming through in the chat and everything we do, but you guys have such a positive influence on the nonprofit space. It's unbelievable. I remember the first time that we met, it was just like, sparks flew in a sense. Yep. But then I talked to more and more people that hang out with you guys. I'm like, oh, sparks flew with everybody that you guys meet just because you guys bring so much energy. So thanks for all that you do in our space.
Well,
thank you so much. That's enough about us. Now let's get to you. So, we got to hear Gabe's story.
I mean, one of our values is simplify, humanize, tell a great story. To us, Gabe is a titan in the industry with what you've built, but we want to get to know Gabe. Little Gabe growing up. Tell us a little bit about formative experiences that got you into this work.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I am fortunate and blessed enough to where I grew up with a pretty great family, pretty great parents, and so in some ways kind of had a head start in life just based on the way I was raised. And a lot of my view of generosity now actually comes from the family I grew up in and my parents. We were always pretty middle class, lower middle class kind of, but I saw my folks be freakishly generous to the people around them. I remember my mom driving meals around through Meals on Wheels to our community every week when I was a kid. And so I just got to see that a lot growing up as a kid. And so we lived in a little town in West Texas, Eastern New Mexico, and moved out to Arizona when I was young. But I think through my formative years, college and after, ended up around a few people that just had this really big view of generosity that opened my mind for what generosity could create in the world. And I think for me, it's probably my late 20s, early 30s, caught this bug around, hey, generosity is really cool because you get to have this amazing impact in the world, which everybody sees. I mean, all the amazing orgs today they're doing amazing work in the world. So when people give them money, when they give them their time, they're just doing crazy stuff. And we've seen it through even our speakers today. But the thing that really impressed me is generosity has the ability to shift the heart of the giver. And so I kind of think that the world around us gets a little bit selfish sometimes and bent in on itself, if that makes sense. You watch the news every night and people are pretty polarized and people are pretty self-interested. And I think generosity becomes this amazing antidote for the selfishness that we sometimes see around us. It makes people better. And so I think, seeing people that had that vision for the world when I was young and then being able to see it play out in my career has been amazing.
I mean, that just comes through. I feel like in your story, I remember also the first time we met and just thinking, and I say we had some limited beliefs. It was like,
Sure.
we don't want a tech CEO on our podcast because we don't want to just talk about tech, but you just grounded us in exactly why, like, we love Virtuous so much, because the tech is like the fifth thing that we talk about. It's more about the people. It's about the engagement. It's about the experience. It's about the innovation. And I think that we call it an impact uprising, where people like us are trying to find other heart-wired humans that we can connect to do more good more quickly. And so I think I want to talk about this book a little bit because I got an early copy in November, December, and I want to be very honest with you. The first time I went through it, I put it in Chat GPT-4 and said, give me like,
Awesome.
give me like 20 pages on this first. And even just that right there, it was just really revolutionary because it's what we want to see more. We call this trying stuff, but it is innovation. And it is what nonprofits need to do to get us up to the forefront of where these major brands are and where we're seeing traction and where we're building community faster and more authentically. And so I want you to kind of take us back and why you decided to write this book, and what problem did you see in the world that you wanted to solve by having this conversation and diving deeply?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I wrote my first book several years ago around the idea that nonprofits should build more personal relationships with donors, right? As a donor, what I experienced was I would get the same piece of direct mail or the same email that everybody else would get. And it would just kind of feel like a little cold, like institutional and cold. I mean, my heart would be super wrapped around whatever cause that was. Like, I'd be very personally engaged. And when I got back, felt like kind of like disconnected from why I gave, right? And so
Mr. Cooper, dear Mr. Cooper.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Or naming your wife. Yes, instead of you.
Dear
Yes.
friend or whatever. Right. And so, like, I hated that experience. So we wrote the first book as a way to say, hey, there's a better way. Like, technology, data, and a different way to think about the world can help us build more personal relationships with donors, like really draw them into the cause. And when we started talking about that in the market, what we heard from a lot of fundraisers was, yes, like, I want to do that. I've always wanted to do that. I just didn't have a name for it, but it's like, I know that's what we should be doing, right? And a lot of resonance in the market. But as we started pushing in, I think what we discovered is the reason that people weren't doing that wasn't because they didn't want to or they didn't understand it. It's because there was sort of cultural and organizational sort of institutional inertia had set in, that like the status quo had taken over, and just changing was the hard part. It's like, yes, I want to go there. I just don't know how to go there. And so I think what we recognize is that some of the problems are way deeper than just fundraising tactics. They're sort of institutional, systemic sort of barriers or anchors that prevent us as nonprofits from changing and evolving quickly. And so this book is sort of like a playbook for, okay, how do you change? Now, it could be changing from a non-responsive fundraising system to responsive, but it can even be, like, how do you change your program? Like, how do you change how you think about finance or ops or IT? It's any big change in your organization. Nonprofits need a better playbook for how to innovate quickly and change. And so that this book is practices to help nonprofits do that.
I mean, thank you for putting words around it. I got a lift. We had a conversation with Seth Godin on the podcast. It was this season or last. But he came on and he said, look, we talk about innovation all the time, but it should be in the very wiring of DNA of nonprofits, because by the very nature, we're trying to solve for problems that we don't have the answers to. So if we don't show up with a posture of innovation, we're not even doing our work. And so I love that you see that. You're trying to galvanize and make it clear by really naming out these pillars. And I want to talk about the 8 pillars that you outline in the book. And then maybe you can take us deeper in one of them that you want to talk about. But what are the 8 pillars? Kind of run us through them.
Oh, gosh.
You may need a copy.
Yeah. You're putting me on the spot. So creating a culture of innovation, human-centered design, agile practices, community and storytelling.
It's like the We're for Good playbook.
Yes.
I'm loving it.
Removing team silos. What did I miss? Oh, I got that one. Storytelling, generosity ops, which I talked a little bit about today. metrics and goal setting. Yeah, those are the core ones. They all fit together. So the book is designed so that you could read each one of the practices individually and just do that thing. It's going to be great for you. But symbiotically, they kind of all fit together. And so if you can do a little bit of all of them, you'll see momentum really fast.
I'm already feeling like the shift, because I think that's a word that we've been hearing a lot in our community, is that people are really interested in the critical mass of this moment. It feels like we're sort of at a tipping point in the sector. And even someone in the chat, I think 2 panels ago, was saying, I feel like I'm in a crossroads right now in my job, in what I want to do impact work. And I think that what I got from this book was so much about how do you, one, change the mindset, how do you implement what we call like pilots, or how do you start trying stuff? And so I would love for you to kind of maybe just unpack 1 or 2 of them, like which one is sort of resonating with you. You've listened to the chat today, we've been listening to the community. What do you think is really going to resonate with people when they read this?
Yeah, I think one is probably testing small stuff, right? And we can get into that. So that's one. And the one that I didn't really talk about today in my talk was the community building and storytelling. Those are probably the 2 that I think are going to be a big deal. I think on the testing, I think the infrastructure of nonprofits is sometimes hard because a lot of nonprofits operate with annual budget cycles, right? And you sort of, a lot of nonprofits like spend however much they raise in a year. And so you set your budget at the first of the year, you come up with a plan, you execute to that plan. And at the end of the year, you sort of fingers crossed that worked, right? And it's really hard to innovate in that environment, because what inevitably happens, and I've been a part of nonprofits that do this all the time, where you get like 2 months into the plan and you're like, oh, that thing we thought would work is definitely not working. Now, it's what do we do? Do we stop doing it? Do we go back to the board to try to reapprove something totally different?
Anybody out there in the audience felt that? Yes.
Yes. And so, and it's just very frustrating. So I feel like there's got to be a better way to align your team and align your board around, hey, we don't know all the answers today, right? And we're going to allocate some budget and some team time for experimentation. And we're going to create really small experiments to prove whether something works or not. And so part of that's agile, like we're going to do 2-week sprints. Like we're not going to change our entire direct mail program. We're going to design a test that allows us to test one thing to prove whether it works. If it works, we double down on that thing. If it doesn't work, we stop doing that thing, but we're doing it in very short cycles. And we sort of have to get board and leadership buy-in to do it this way. But the outcome is way better if we give ourselves permission to pivot in the middle of the year and test and improve as we go. So a lot of that's kind of in the agile part of the book. But the other one, and we can dive into this because I know you guys have a passion for this, is like storytelling and community, right? And so I think what we found is a lot of nonprofits I talk to are like, hey, we'd love to do a lot more stuff. We're just really budget constrained and team constrained, right?
Yes.
Like I got 3 people on my fundraising and marketing team. I got 5 people. Like we can't afford to hire anybody else. I don't know what we can do here. And yes, that's true. And there are very real constraints within the nonprofit space. Like, you know, what is it? Too little butter, too much bread at so many nonprofits. And I get it. I really do get those constraints. At the same time, nonprofits often have a community of people that are really, really passionate about their cause that aren't full-time employees of the nonprofit.
Right.
You have the ability to create a movement around your cause if you tell a great story. And if you think about your donors as more than just a checkbook, like if you think, I have this army of people with amazing superpowers that if I can just catalyze them, then I'm not just dependent on me and the other person on my team. Now I have an army of people that I can put to work. And sometimes that's volunteering, sometimes it's giving, but sometimes it's really creative ways to leverage the superpowers of your community to create impact, right? And I think that's just an underappreciated, because so much of the time we think about who is employed by my nonprofit, and that's what I'm restricted to. But I think the sort of the non-fixed mindset is like, no, like there's so much more that you can do with your broader community, but you have to tell a great story to do it.
I mean, yes, you're poking the bear. These are our favorite topics, but they're not only just things that we think are true, we know to be true from our careers in nonprofit, of how much different it is when you build something as a staff versus build it with community. It's so much better. It's so much more vibrant. It reaches people that you're never going to reach as a result of that. So I'm loving that you listed storytelling as one of your points, because we're talking about innovation, and storytelling is literally like one of the most old school ways to pass on knowledge. Like, what surprised you, as you kind of dug into this? Because you did a lot of research and talked to a lot of different nonprofits. What is, disruptive about storytelling that you want to lift?
Yeah, I think one of the things is it's hard to tell stories well. And I think what we've seen in the last 20 years is a lot of for-profits have figured out how to do this really, like Patagonia.
Oh yeah.
They do
I
a
love
great job
Patagonia.
of storytelling, right?
Yes.
Like,
And it makes me want to buy a hoodie. Like,
it
so,
does.
so well done.
Yeah, you watch their videos and there's nothing about Patagonia like gear in their videos. It's just like the impact that
Feeling.
Patagonia is having
Yeah.
on this fisherman in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, but you end up buying Patagonia gear as a
You're
result, right?
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things about storytelling is sometimes nonprofits think about themselves as the hero of the story, right? And yes, your nonprofit is doing amazing work in the world, and you guys are working really hard. But you can't be the hero of the story. If you make yourself the hero of the story, it's not going to draw anybody in to be part of the story with you. And so the trick is thinking about yourself as a guide or a conduit for impact. And so what you're doing is you're helping connect your donors with very real impact. And it's the tricky thing here is your donors aren't always the hero of the story either, right? Because then you kind of have this
We have
weird,
very
like,
strong feelings
Yeah.
about this. I'm so glad you're going
yes,
here.
yeah, because you don't like you don't want them to think of themselves as the savior, right? And so that's hard too. But really, if you set up this story where, hey, there's this real problem in the world, and you can participate shoulder to shoulder to be able to where we're going to impact this problem together, and it's you and me against the problem, and you can tell a story with a real hero's journey, like, hey, there's a problem. We can be your guide to help be part of the solution. And here's what this amazing aspirational reality looks like when we get done. And it's tied in with like emotion and visual storytelling video. I know like Charity Water came up a few times today. They do a brilliant job of this. Like the more we can lean into that, the more we just end up with, thousands of people coming out of the word work that want to follow us. But it's hard to do. And I don't know that enough nonprofits spend enough time nailing it.
Yeah, I mean, we get this question a lot of who is the hero in the story, and our feelings about it are, it's the collective. The collective is the hero, and if anyone can be a part of the movement, step forward, be a part of it. And I think that one of the great unlocks that we've seen in our community is sourcing story from the community, and anyone can do this. And I want to empower all of you out there. Start with your inner circle. Who really believes? We think there's a huge difference between a donor and a believer. A donor is going to bring you cash, but a believer is going to bring you not just a gift, but they can bring you story. They can bring you network. They can bring you amplification. They can bring you volunteer hours. I mean, the list goes on. And why shouldn't we be sourcing stories from the community, from the front lines? I love that that's nestled in here. And there's something in the book that really struck me when I was reading it. And I'm so glad to have a platform to just sit here and thank you for including it. But to me, it's the bedrock of what you all talk about with responsiveness, which is empathy. And how do we connect to the way people feel, our donors feel? How do we connect to how they're feeling leads to a behavior? Talk about the empathy chapter, why you put that in and what you've discovered.
Yeah. So much of that comes out from the ideas of human-centered design. I talked about that a little bit earlier today, but I don't know that and it's on the program side and the fundraising side. There's a whole bunch of stuff on the program side. I'll focus just on the fundraising side.
Perfect.
For now. But I think, and I did this when I was a fundraiser. I'm probably guilty of it now. I'm on a couple of boards where I'm responsible for fundraising, and fundraising can be nerve-wracking, and you feel like you have to have the right answers. And so you just end up leaning hard with a pitch. Like, this is us. This is why it matters. Give us
Struggle
money.
is real.
Yeah. And so,
Yes.
and I do it too. Like, I get it. And it's on the major gift side, but it's also how we do direct response fundraising and emails. But the posture that really leads to the best results is saying, like, do my donors even understand what the heck we're doing here, or how they can make a difference in our cause? Do I know why they care about us or why they gave to us for the first time? Like, I'm making a lot of assumptions about why they showed up or why they care. And so empathy gathering really flips the script, and it sort of flips the pyramid upside down and says, everything I have to learn is from the bottom up, right?
That's
It means like chatting with my donors, figuring out why they care, like what resonates, what doesn't. And it doesn't mean that if we have conviction around how our program works, it doesn't mean that we mold our program to fit the needs of our donors, but it means that we have a true appreciation for like our donors' why. And so we can connect that why directly to the difference we're making in the world.
Just this was bedrock to what we started We Are for Good to chase, the idea of we have to flip the pyramid. We have to engage this massive movement that could be around each of our organizations as we lean into values. So I want to talk for a minute about community. I mean, why do we think this is a great unlock? And what did you see as you kind of put this together in terms of organizations that are using community to their benefit to grow impact?
Yeah. In the chapter in the book, we spend a lot of time. Brian Funk, who was just on the phone with us a minute ago.
Brian, where are
love
you?
He worked at Invisible Children during the Coney 2012 campaign. A lot of you that have been around fundraising a while remember that campaign well.
So powerful.
Right. And so it was a great example of like storytelling. What I talk about in the book, and I don't think people fully appreciate, is people remember the video on YouTube that got like a bajillion views, right? And it's like, there's this guy, Joseph Coney, doing bad stuff in the world. We're going to stop him. What they miss in that story is Brian Funk, who was here on the phone, and all of his friends, they're all like early 20s, no idea what they're doing. They're in like school buses and vans driving around the country, going to elementary schools and high schools and like community events, doing like one-to-one personal relationship. And they did that for years of just building face-to-face connections, talking about the problem in the world, but then listening to feedback from people on the ground to build this movement. There's no like silver bullet in this. It's really just, almost like this guerrilla field marketing of getting out there with your community, shoulder to shoulder, listening and talking about your cause. And the amazing part of the Coney 2012 movement is when that video hits, it's like 1 billion people come out of the woodwork. And it's like, where did all these people come from? Well, it's because this organization cared about getting out in the community, like showing up in
Building
person.
their believers.
Yeah, building believers.
Yeah.
Listening,
One-to-one,
one-to-one,
personalization, so smart.
and not always based on a gift. I mean, their average age of the giver was like 16 at one point. I mean, they're getting like $4 gifts, but it was this like commitment to be like, no, we're going to build a movement here. We don't have all the answers, but we're going to show up. And so when the time comes to go big, they have this army behind them, and it was unbelievable.
I know. It was like the kindness army was the great antidote to that. And I remember being a part of it. I remember watching that video. I was in my, late 20s when that came out. And it was just such a powerful reminder of the humanity that we need to embrace. And I think whenever we gather like this, and we've got wonderful people in the chat, they're going to be asking, who's doing this well? When you think of a responsive nonprofit, certainly you've done a lot of research on this. Lift some of those nonprofits. Tell them what makes them so special.
Yeah, I tend to give a lot of the same examples here, but there's so many that I love. I just one organization that we give to that I talk about a lot is called Atlas Free. So they're working strategically to end sex trafficking globally, and when you're working on systemic changes, your gift ask becomes a little bit harder because you're like, it's not like give $30 to save this child. You're working on changing systems and governments and policies and coordinating. But what they do really well is they care about me personally. So they just had a big team event somewhere in Europe. Somebody on their team sent me a postcard, like handwritten postcard, like, hey, this is what, and it's like from the city they're meeting at, right? Like, this is what we're doing. This is how your work matters. This is how our strategy is evolving. Like, they admit failure. Like, this is like, but it's very, very personal to me. And it would just like, it's one of those, now it ends up on my fridge kind of deal.
Yeah.
And so Atlas Free is one of those for me. Like, they've done so many things that are hyper personal. And it's not like I'm a massive giver to the organization. This is stuff they're doing for everybody. One of the things they did I've talked about this before, but they did a YouTube video, or YouTube videos where their CEO creates this video to thank their donors. Now they did some creative video editing around it, but the way they sliced it with a B-roll is he does this long thing talking about the impact you're having in the world, but then it cuts to him saying like Gabe and Farah, you guys' gift like made a massive difference in this part of the world last year. And like it required some creativity in video, but I think he probably recorded the names of like 1,000 different donors that day,
So smart,
and had their team like slice
Without
it into
AI.
video without AI.
Amazing.
But it takes time and it's hard, but oh my gosh, like the power of that and sort of moving the hearts and minds of people is amazing.
Okay, I got to give a shout out to a nonprofit that
Do
has
it.
done this.
Yeah,
Kyle
please.
DeGood, if you are out there, we know you are in the We Are for Good community, but he works with Dolly Parton's nonprofit.
awesome.
And I got, imagination and just all about literacy and getting books into the hands of kids. And he sent me a DM one time in my Instagram, and it was Dolly singing to me and
That's
saying,
awesome.
Becky,
How
you
have I
know,
not seen this? Becky?
how did
Oh
I
my
not
gosh.
show you this? But also I wrote him back and was like, Dolly is singing to me, and Dolly is like number 2 on our ungettable get list. I want to talk to Dolly. And he said she sat there all day and we gave her 842 names and
No
she sang
way.
every one of them. And it's like that level of care. And I mean, it changes you. I mean, we've
Yeah.
got a core value number 6 of steward relentlessly. How do you just keep connecting? So I had to lift that story. Anytime I can talk about Dolly's a good day. So
And I think it speaks to like there's no short circuiting, there's no fast way to do the humanity piece. Like we have all these great tools now to maybe make our lives easier with AI to write content, but we have to bring the humanity. We have to bring that little touch point to really bring it home. So is there a tool, tactic, obviously Virtuous, we got to rep the Virtuous
Yeah,
platform a little bit, but
Yeah.
what are the tools and the trade that you would really, point to through this book too?
Yeah. I think, we, and it's interesting. I want to get to something you said there is I think using data and automation, I said it today, is eliminating the menial work so you can focus on the meaningful work. One of our customers said that, and I thought it resonated so much. And so like marketing automation and business process automation is one. So it allows you to be more personal at scale, like automate the right communication at the right time on the right channel. So everybody gets something more personal than just your spray and pray email. But then automating a lot of the processes around your nonprofit, they just suck up a lot of your time to free your time up to do meaningful work. Now, the trick is, you're right, there's no silver bullet. And so initially when we started talking about marketing automation, people say, well, it's like you just have your technology do it for you. It's like a robot's doing your fundraising. Doesn't that take out the personal? I'm like, no, like it makes it more personal when you don't blast the same thing to 1 million people.
there you go.
But it also frees up your time so that you can do the hard work of recording 800 different people or like getting on the road and having coffee with people or making that phone call or doing that handwritten postcard. It doesn't sort of, if it eliminates menial to do meaningful, it means you have to take the rest of your day to do the meaningful stuff, like the hard work of relationship building, the getting out on the road, the calling donors. Like it takes that part of it too. But the more we can use technology to free up our time, the more we're able to really do the amazing work of relationship building.
And stay healthy and balanced and ready
That's
to get
right.
back up the next day to do it.
That's
I
right.
see a really good question for you in the Q&A, and I want to encourage anybody who's listening right now to drop your questions in the Q&A. What is your favorite place to source stories? Donors, volunteers, employees, the served community, or is it a magic combo of all of them? You want to take this one? And great question, Catherine.
Yeah. It depends on your nonprofit.
I'm like, yes.
Yes.
Yes to
All of those things. One of the stories I've told before, but I just loved it is during COVID, the ballet here in town, like they couldn't perform. Right. And so a thing that they did that they really hadn't done before is they did Zoom calls with some of their people that had been faithful to them for a long time.
Obsessed.
And then they
Yes.
had their performers jump on the phone. Well, like those people had, it's always like a performer way off on a stage when you go to the ballet, but now they have this person on a Zoom call and they can ask questions like, do your feet hurt? Like, how often
Number
did
one
your mom
question.
have to drive you to lessons when you were a kid? Like
Gosh.
just shortening the distance. And so I think as much as you can get creative and bringing the cause close to the donor, which means super tight in with your program team, right? Yeah, like program for me, program and fundraising should be meeting weekly to talk about what stories are there, what's happening in the field. Famously, World Vision, they would never open up a new project anywhere in the world without taking somebody from fundraising and marketing. So they wouldn't send like a program person when they were thinking about moving into, whatever country. They took program, fundraising, and marketing together
So smart.
to be able to, right? And so it's like program and fundraising. The other thing is telling your donor stories well. So there's a few websites that have done this in the past. I love this. I think Charity Water did it for a while, where they would film stories of their donors, right? So and now they're really not a checkbook. Now you're like showing up in their backyard saying, we'd love to do a movie of you talking about why, like what made you give, like who are you and why did you give, right? And so that does a couple of things. Number one is that person's going to be faithful for life because now they're part of your story. But now it's not just that a donor can see the impact you're making out there. They get to see people like them that they can empathize with. Like
I love that.
their story is similar to my story. And now I feel like I can be more engaged because I see people like me that also give to this organization.
I mean, we're back to community building, belonging, all of those things. So I got to ask, I mean, you have these 8 pillars. I can already tell they're revolutionary. What do you hope it unlocks? What do you hope that nonprofits reading this, what'll come about as a part of this book?
Yeah. My dream has always been that nonprofits are doing sort of like the most important work in the world. They're solving some of the world's toughest challenges. They're creating human flourishing. They're like moving the world forward in a way that no other sort of sphere of civilization can, right? With that in mind, they deserve the very best in technology, not the for-profit space. They deserve the very best in people. They deserve the best and brightest talent out there, not like sort of second-rate also ran. I guess I work in a nonprofit. They deserve people that are like the cutting edge, but they also should be the most innovative organizations on the planet. Like if we're trying to solve environmental problems or water problems or disease problems, or even the arts or higher ed, like if these are big challenges, we need to bring our best. And so it's in those areas where we should see the most innovation. It should be like the Ubers and Netflix of the world should be looking over the wall at the nonprofit space saying, what are they doing? How are they innovating?
Love this throwdown.
And so
Manifestation.
Yeah. So I'm, in this book is a small rock in a very big pond, but I'm hoping that it contributes in a meaningful way to sort of pushing that forward.
Well, okay, so let me manifest something else. Like I want people to read this book because I believe in I believe deeply in continuing education and pouring into yourself, especially right now in this world that is shifting and changing so radically. But get this book and give it to a friend once you're done. Think about who could benefit from this one-to-one. We want to create the ripple. Yes, it's a contribution, but we want it to be a contribution that ripples and ripples. So I thank you so much for giving in to the sector. This is a gift to the sector. It's not just a book. And we believe so much in the heart of storytelling and just bringing it back to the why of why we do what we do. So I want to ask you, Gabe, to take us to a moment of philanthropy in your life. It doesn't have to be in giving. It could be a moment of kindness. It could be a formative experience. Like, tell us that story and why it changed you.
Yeah. It's actually a story that my dad told me, and when him and my mom were going out and participating in generosity, it's always just stuck with me. It's they were doing like Christmas gifts for impoverished families, like, families that just didn't have the money to make Christmas happen. And so it would be all of these people, they would show up at the people's house to give the kids in the house gifts for Christmas. And my dad did that at a couple of houses, and and especially if there was like a dad in the house, he would just see
Yep.
the dad's face, and he would just look dejected, like horrified almost. And my dad, who's kind of thought about generosity in traditional ways for a long time, it dawned on him like, this isn't helping anybody. Like, yeah, this kid got a new bike, but like, I'm like cutting these poor parents off at the knees, particularly this dad's here that feels like, man, he's not able to do this for himself. And so my dad said, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. The next couple of houses, we're going to knock on the door, see if the parents are home, and then give the gifts to the parents to give to the kids, right?
Dignity.
And so adding dignity to the situation. And I think that was one of the stories that happened is probably 15 years ago. And, you know, my dad's old school. He comes from a generation that was just like, you know, hey, we can give money and save the people kind of generation. So for him to see that to dawn on him, that's really stuck with me over time. And just like, man, how can we give in a more thoughtful way? How can we inspire the kind of generosity that brings us all in this together? Instead of the old school kind of philanthropy where, like, you know, I give $1 bajillion, I become the savior, I get my name on the building. And not that there's anything always wrong with like crediting donors, but like, how do I shorten that gap a little bit so we're all in this together?
Impact Uprising. I mean, I think it all plays into centering dignity in this work and actually changing the narratives that have been holding us back or beliefs that have been holding us back. I mean, Gabe, I'm excited to get this book. I'm thinking of leaders that I want to get this in the hands of, but we can't end a podcast recording without asking for a one good thing. You know, what's a piece of advice, a mantra, something that bubbles up to you that you want to leave with the community today?
I know. I should have
prepped this one.
It is our most feared question of anyone asking us. So I feel
something that struck you today. I mean, we've had a lot of takeaways from today.
Yeah, I'm still like sort of processing Sixo's talk from yesterday morning. His story was just so incredibly powerful. But outside of Sixo's talk, I think for me, it's like just start. Like analysis paralysis sits in. It's going to be always something we get to in the future, and it always feels like we're trying to boil the ocean here. And I get it. I've been there. But what are the 3 things I could do today, or the one thing I can do today to take steps toward becoming more innovative, to bring my donors closer to my cause? What's the one thing I can do today? And start there. Don't get paralyzed with, man, this is way too much.
I'm obsessed with the idea of doing one innovative thing a day. I mean, this what we talk about is a 1% shift. How can you do one thing that leads to something And again, we're back to ripples again. So thank you for that. Love talking to you. Love this book. Tell people how they can get this book. Brian or Steven are going to drop the link into the chat so you can go directly to it. But where can people go find it?
Yeah. So virtuous.org/book. You can find a link to a copy there and a little summary of the book. I think you can register to win a free book there as well.
Hey, give one to a friend.
And it's on Amazon right now. As of this recording, like pre-order, but I think it's shipping next week. So that's a great place to get it as well.
Got it here first, behind the scenes. Thank you just on behalf of the Impact community for the book, for the ways you continue to show up. You see people, you connect the dots in such a human way. We love your staff and your team. We love what you represent. Thank you for trusting We Are For Good to come in here, and just huge fans of you and your work.
Thank you guys. You guys do an amazing job. Bring the best out of everybody. So thank you so much.
And thank you guys for joining in. Thank you for the applause track, Tyler. We are so excited about what we learned today, and we just want to put a big bow on what an incredible day 2 we had here at RNS. So we will see you back here again with our final day, and we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to bring the heat and the hype next day. So we'll see you there.
Thank you, Feather, for this space. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great day, do-gooders.